In an amazing development, and in order to curb massive blowouts in military spending, the Australian government is, and I'm not kidding, increasing military spending. Welcome to another of my tabletop talks, and the first for a while as I've been traveling. I've actually been in the Xinjiang desert and then came back to another trip to Hangzhou, so first time back for a while. Seriously, an Australian headline reads, and I quote, "Government unveils Department of Defence overhaul amid delays and cost blowouts," end of quote. And the summary of the article on Australia's ABC states, Defence currently has a budget of almost 60 billion a year, but that figure is set to rise to about 100 billion annually by 2034. And yet this consolidation is about to reduce costs and avoid delays. Currently, the Australian government spends a hefty 2% of GDP. Within 10 years, due to hugely expensive and most people would agree unnecessary submarine contracts with the US and UK called AUKUS, it will increase that to 2.4%. And Donald Trump is currently asking Australia to work harder and bring it up to 3.5%. So, in order to accommodate a president who has slapped tariffs on Australia despite having a surplus trade with the country, it's been reported that there will be a massive overhaul of the Defence Ministry and the Defence Industry Ministry. You'd think that in a country as remote as Australia and with a population of less than 27 million, as well as a military of less than 90,000 personnel, including reserves, it seems highly unlikely that 100 billion will ever be needed, but that's what the US are making them do. And why have two departments about it? There's set to be an historic overhaul of the defence bureaucracy, that's great, which according to the Sydney Morning Herald has set the stage for a vigorous debate on funding among the Albanese government's most powerful players. Defence Minister Richard Marles and Defence Industry Minister Pat Conroy push their cabinet, or will be pushing their cabinet colleagues, for a substantial rise in military spending. Now wait, what? How does this actually happen? First of all, the reforms are aimed at reducing the military's many multi-billion-dollar blowouts. 3 existing Defence Department agencies, yes, there are 3 of them in a country that has less than 27 million citizens and no military threats since the Second World War. They have 3 different department agencies that deal with defence. And this is causing inconsistencies, some confusion, and blowouts in costs as well as delays. So they're going to merge the 3 into a super agency. That makes sense. Reporting directly to, and this is another confusing part, Richard Marles and Pat Conroy. So we'll have 2 heads. Now, if you want to avoid confusion and blowouts and then hold people accountable for both the successes and or the failures, there only needs to be 1 head of a department, not 2. But no, this is Australia. Very large S. The Autonomous Agency, that's what they're calling it, will be established in July 2027. It will be headed by the National Armaments Director. That's a new position, and that person will control the budget for all major defence acquisitions. Now that makes sense, but he, and I say he not because I'm sexist, but because I believe it will be a man, because almost certainly it will be a Labour Party crony, and they are almost all men, is going to have 2 ministerial bosses. Marles and Conroy are expected to use this overhaul to lobby for more defence funding, arguing that the Defence Force will spend the extra money more efficiently than it would have under the current structure. Now surely if they can make it more efficient and save money from cost blowouts, then they need less money, not more. That makes logical sense. I can't help thinking back to a time when I was a general manager of a multinational corporation. If I'd put a cost-saving strategy or plan to my board, I'm certain they would have approved it, only if it was making savings, not if I was asking for more money to do it. Defence experts, who we can assume mean people in the military-industrial complex, which is quite large in Australia, have, unsurprisingly, welcomed the change, but said, again, unsurprisingly, that it needs to be paired with more money to achieve real reform. The government is also preparing to announce an overhaul into the sprawling defence estate portfolio, including selling historic sites in several capital cities, so they will get more money by selling off old assets. If that sounds familiar, look at the UK, which during the Thatcher era and since has sold almost all of its assets and is now paying the price because it needs to rent them back at exorbitant prices from mostly US-based asset managers. The defense budget for this large country but tiny nation is increasing every year. I suspect they can't say this, but they should be as worried about the re-emergence of Japan as a military power in Asia as China is. For sure, despite all their rhetoric about it, there has never been a credible threat to Australia by any country since they were invaded, bombed, and thousands of their soldiers were captured, tortured, brutally enslaved, and even murdered by their current ally, the Japanese. There is every reason to fear Japan right now. Their parliament, the Diet, has just approved massive permanent increases in military spending. They've also recently approved budgets of $5.4 billion over and above the previously approved military spending, and $782 million to fast-track aircraft and vessel readiness, $74 million for 2 Mogami-class frigates, and $39.3 million for 4 Tagai-class submarines, and Tokyo plans to build 12 upgraded Mogami-class frigates by 2032. Japan has also made it clear in the past and quite recently that they need to colonize because other countries have resources they need for Japan to survive. Their Prime Minister just said so. If they're in danger from a survival type event, which could simply mean not enough resources, they're now legally allowed by their own law to invade any country that threatens their survival, and that, given the amount of massive resources Australia has, should make the Australians far more worried that any threat from China than any threat from China to buy what it needs. Thanks again for watching my tabletop talk, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.